Hi, my name is Chris Willard from Leadership Network, and I'm really happy to be talking today to Shaunti Feldhahn, the author of a great new book called The Good News About Marriage. Thanks for joining me today, Shaunti. It's great to talk to you.
I'm glad to have the chance. Thanks so much.
Talk about what was in your mind as you were thinking about writing the book. Like, what prompted you to put this book together?
I'm in this field of interviewing and surveying a lot of people, and I do a lot of work with marriage, and I've seen that there is this really, truly an important trend underneath the surface in what people don't really what people don't really say out loud, but they are thinking. And it's really what leads to breakdown in marriage. And I've seen that there's this one common denominator in all these surveys and all these interviews I've done with people, that really this one common denominator underneath whether a marriage survives or fails has to do with whether the couple has a sense of hope or a sense of futility.
Wow.
And it's really interesting because if you think about it, it makes perfect sense. There's many factors that lead to marriage breakdown, obviously. But underneath which outcome happens really is whether the couple thinks they're going to make it or not.
So what's so great about the work that you did is, I think in this culture today, people have ample reason to believe that their marriage is probably not going to make it, right? I mean, marriage is so impossible, it's so difficult. But as you were doing your research, I think you uncovered some things that could really give people hope to think that their marriage really could make it.
Yeah, and because that really is what's needed, right? Because right now, truly, the problem is that we all have this feeling like it's a flip the coin idea of whether a marriage is going to make it, or, whether you think, is it fighting the inevitable? I mean, because if it's fighting the inevitable that we're not going to make it, then you start giving up and it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. And I really uncovered over these last 8 years of research, I was shocked as I started looking into the numbers and figured out that so much of this culture-wide feeling of discouragement that we have that makes people feel that way is based on this conventional wisdom that just isn't true and are these massive myths. Now, don't get me wrong. I mean, there are plenty of concerns about marriage in our culture that are very real. And part of the reason why I did the research was to figure out what was real and what wasn't. It was very complicated and it took a long time, but truly have uncovered some things that it's not just okay news about marriage. It's really great news.
Right. So one of the things that you uncover is this huge aha. Like, I have been in marriage ministry for years. I've probably said 100 or more times myself, the research indicates that 50% of marriages in America end in divorce. Your research, which is brand new and very extensive, this is not a cursory look, right? Your research kind of blows that myth out of the water, doesn't it?
Yeah, it really does. Because basically what we uncovered is that this idea that there's a 50% divorce rate isn't true. It has never been true overall as a societal average. Now, there are actually several subgroups. There are some specialized high-risk groups that have hit that kind of 50% divorce rate. You get married as a teenager, for example. That's a very small group of people, but they have a pretty high divorce rate. Though there are some of those subgroups, but overall, we've never gotten close. People think that there's a 50% divorce rate because people have been projecting that for years, and experts who I really respect a lot and helped me on the book research a lot still continue to project that we're going to hit that 50% divorce rate someday. But I look at the actual numbers, and we've never gotten close, again, as an overall average. And so I think at some point, really, we have to have a really serious conversation about revising those projections, because it's discouraging people and they don't realize it's just a projection. We've never hit those numbers as a measurement. Let me give you an example. Right now, as we're talking about this, according to Census Bureau data, 71% of women, people tend to use women as the standard for demographics, 71% of women are still married to their first spouse.
Wow.
And the 29% that aren't, that's not even the divorce rate. That includes everyone that was married for years until a spouse passed away.
Wow.
And so that's just marriages that have ended. No one knows what the first marriage divorce rate actually is. And frankly, I think that's one of the reasons the myths get started. You know, in the absence of really good, easy, clear information, it's kind of easy for the myths to spread. But we can get closer. We know it has to be less than 29, again, overall, as an average. There's about a 14% rate of widowhood. There's some other factors. So we can estimate that on average, about 20 to 25% of first marriages have ended in divorce. Now, that's still way too high.
Sure.
You know, that's still nothing to get all excited about. That's still a problem. But it changes everything when you realize, wait a minute, most marriages last a lifetime. That's a completely different feeling for a struggling couple or a couple going into a marriage as young idealists and thinking, you know what, we're probably going to make it. Yeah, we may go through some issues, but we'll make it because most people do.
I think it's also a stunning aha for pastors and people who are in ministry, right? Trying to care for and help married people. If you could say to that young couple, listen, I get it. The things you're dealing with, they're real and they're painful and they're difficult, and we're not minimizing that. But did you know that most people make it?
Yeah.
People dealing with the stuff you're dealing with make it. So let's help you. Let's get some training, some coaching, some support, but you'll probably make it. That's a huge game changer, I think.
Yeah. Oh, it's a completely different issue, I think, than what we have today, which is people fighting this sense of, oh my gosh, you know, the ship is going to sink anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I can work all I want to, I can try real hard to try to bail the ship out, but it's probably going down.
Mm-hmm.
And you know what? If you start thinking that, then what that means is you're going to stop trying to bail the ship out.
Right.
You're going to think that I might as well give up. You know, kind of why bother? And that sense of futility sucks the motivation out of people. And I think a lot of us have said these bad numbers, including me. I've said all the wrong numbers for years from the stage before I knew that they were wrong. I think I used to say them because I thought I was motivating people.
Yeah.
You know, to try to work harder. And I had no idea until I started doing this research and started talking to just the average person about how they felt about things. And I realized, you know what? It doesn't motivate people.
Right.
It sucks the hope and the life out of them, and they give up.
Okay, so that is so true. And so here's the next thing that I and others have often said after we've said 50% of marriages end in divorce. The next thing we say is, and sadly, the statistics are the same for people in the church. Well, one of the other great ahas from your book is that that's not really true either, is it?
No, and nowhere close to true. And this is one of those things that has frustrated me so much because it has discouraged so many pastors, especially, but it also discourages the average person in the pew. We all think that George Barna found that the rate of divorce is the same in the church, and he didn't, because he wasn't studying divorce in the church. That wasn't even what he was trying to study. See, what Barna was doing specifically was studying what people believe and belief systems. And so if you call people on the phone and ask the "Are you a Christian?" questions, someone who said they were a Christian, someone who said they were Jewish, someone who said that they, you know, were agnostic, those people had the same divorce rates. But Barna specifically excluded whether they went to church from the analysis because that wasn't what he was trying to study. And so what I did is I partnered with Barna, and what we did is we took that same data set that, you know, everybody thinks found that the rate of divorce is the same in the church. We took that same data set and we reran all of the numbers, but with the factor added of, was the person in church last week? In the last 7 days, had they attended church? And, you know, it's not a perfect measure, but it certainly gets you closer.
Right.
And what we found is that for people who actually had attended church, the divorce rate dropped by 27%.
Unbelievable.
And that's actually, it's really important to know that that's actually the smallest drop that all the studies have found. There have been many studies. I think we mentioned several in the book that they all were done differently, but they all found the same thing, which is that for those people who their faith is part of their life, and they actually get themselves in the local church and they actually become part of the church community, that the rate of divorce drops anywhere from 25 to 50%. That's huge for
Yeah,
a pastor to be able to say that.
that is so great, and it's a great segue to what I wanted to. Another thing that I wanted to mention, which is that Leadership Network is putting together another leadership community for pastors and church leaders who are trying to build an effective, solid, really great marriage and family ministry. And that's going to begin in October of 2014. There's information about that marriage and family leadership community on our website, which is leadnet.org. One more thing I want to say too, Shaunti, before I just ask if you have any last thoughts for pastors who are thinking about marriage and family ministry in their church. One thing I would want to encourage anybody who's listening to this interview is get a copy of Shaunti's book. It's The Good News About Marriage. There have been a lot of great reviews out there. There's a couple of really great articles that summarize some of the findings. But I discovered that it was really important that I actually read the whole book and kind of dig in. It really is going to help me to have be much more equipped to have conversations. I think sometimes busy pastors just kind of read the excerpts, and this is one of those things you want to really try to read the whole thing.
I appreciate that. Well, and that's one of the reasons I'll tell the pastors listening to this privately, all you pastors listening to this, even though the book ostensibly is for anyone who cares about marriage, we wrote it specifically with the pastor of the local church as our primary audience, because you guys are the ones on the front lines. And so we wrote it to be a really small, easy to read, simple primer. But I appreciate that, Chris, because honestly, if a pastor doesn't get that primer, he might be encouraged for a few minutes until he sees the next newspaper article that seems to contradict what I'm saying. But if he gets the primer, he can see, oh, this newspaper article isn't even covering the same thing. It just looks discouraging, but it really isn't.
That's great. Well, I really appreciate all of the hard work that went into this book and all of the other things that you've written that we've really benefited from. I want to encourage anybody who has any interest, they can visit Shaunti's website, which is just your first name, right? Shaunti.com.
Yep.
The book is available there. Other information is there. Shaunti loves to visit with churches and often will speak in a church or be interviewed by a lead pastor in a church talking about her work. A great way for you to expose your congregation to the great things that Shaunti is doing. Again, let me remind anybody who's interested to check out leadnet.org to find out information about the upcoming leadership community. Shaunti, thank you again for your time. You've been great, and it's really great to talk with you.
Oh, thanks so much, Chris. I appreciate that.
Take care.
Thanks.